Welcome to our exploration of the top creepy places in Florida. Florida is one of the most enigmatic and storied states in America, a land of extremes, where wild swamps stretch endlessly, Spanish moss drapes ancient oaks, and pastel-colored towns rise from the mist along sunlit coasts. Travel its winding highways and you'll pass forgotten sugar plantations, centuries-old missions, and cemeteries where the moss grows thick and the air feels heavy. It is beautiful, timeless, and deeply haunted. This is a place where history was written in storms and struggle. From the first indigenous settlements and Spanish conquests to pirate raids, Civil War battles, and the feverish boom of the railroad age, Florida has witnessed centuries of conflict, disaster, and untimely death. Its past is layered with tales of shipwrecks, lost fortunes, and communities swallowed by the wild. Locals whisper of ghostly apparitions, cursed islands, and places where the past refuses to stay buried. Tonight, we're peeling back the sun-drenched surface of Florida and stepping into its shadows. These are the state's most haunted places, where legends are alive and the line between the living and the dead is dangerously thin. Before we enter the realm of the unknown, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss out as we uncover the mysteries of haunted Florida. Remember to like, share, and comment below with your own tales of the supernatural, if you dare. Number 5. May Stringer House, Brooksville. In the quiet heart of Brooksville, Florida, stands a house where history and heartbreak have blurred the line between the living and the dead. This is the May Stringer House, a mansion built on sorrow, loss, and stories that refuse to fade. It began in 1855, when John May built a 4-room home for his wife, Marina, and their daughters. But happiness here was fleeting. Just 3 years later, John succumbed to tuberculosis, leaving Marina a widow in a house that suddenly felt far too large. She remarried Frank Saxon, a Confederate soldier and local legislator, hoping for a new beginning. But tragedy struck again. In 1869, Marina died during childbirth, and her infant daughter, Jessie May, soon followed. The grief of these early years settled deep into the walls. As the decades passed, the home changed hands and purposes. In the 1880s, Dr. Sheldon Stringer purchased the property and transformed it into the grand 14-room Victorian mansion that stands today. Dr. Stringer used his new home as a medical office and sanatorium, treating patients suffering from tuberculosis, yellow fever, and other deadly diseases. Many of those patients died here, their bodies laid to rest in unmarked graves on the property. Local lore claims that as many as 50 souls, patients and possibly enslaved people from the area's antebellum past, are buried somewhere on these grounds. Today, the May Stringer House is a museum by day and a magnet for ghost hunters by night. Its rooms are filled with Victorian antiques, Civil War relics, and artifacts that seem to hum with memory. But it's not just the objects that draw curiosity seekers. It's what lingers in the air, the sense that the past isn't finished here. Visitors report cold spots, sudden chills, and the sensation of being watched. In the nursery, toys have been seen moving on their own, and some guests claim to feel a small, cold hand slip into theirs, only to find no one there. Disembodied voices, phantom footsteps, and the laughter of a child echo through the halls. Many believe this is the spirit of Jessie May, still searching for her mother. Others have seen the apparition of a woman in period dress, thought to be Marina, gazing from the upstairs windows or drifting through the rooms. The scent of lavender, her favorite, sometimes fills the air without explanation. There are tales of a protective soldier, likely Frank Saxon, and a more aggressive entity known as Mr. Nasty, who haunts the attic, provoking dread and even physical sensations like hair pulling and sudden pushes. The house is said to be a thin place, where trauma and longing have left an indelible mark. Paranormal investigators have captured EVPs, unexplained shadows, and even the growls of something angry in the attic. The stories of those who lived and died here are not just history. They are the heartbeat of the May Stringer House. Would you dare to walk these halls after dark, knowing the tragedies that unfolded within these walls are never truly at rest? Number 4. Biltmore Hotel, Coral Gables. Amid the palm-lined avenues and Mediterranean courtyards of Coral Gables, one building rises above the rest, a palace of dreams, drenched in sunlight and shadow. The Biltmore Hotel is more than a Florida landmark. It's a living archive of ambition, extravagance, tragedy, and the unexplained. The story begins in 1926, a year when Florida was booming and the world seemed to spin faster with every jazz note. Developer George Merrick envisioned a hotel to rival the grandest in Europe, and architects Schulze and Weaver, fresh from designing New York's Grand Central Terminal, brought that vision to life. The Biltmore's 400 rooms, soaring 315-foot tower, and mosaic-tiled pools became the backdrop for a new era of luxury. It was a place where presidents, movie stars, and socialites mingled under crystal chandeliers, where champagne flowed, and the air was thick with the thrill of possibility. But beneath the glamour, the Biltmore's foundations were already trembling. Prohibition was the law of the land, but here, it was little more than a suggestion. Hidden speakeasies, secret passageways, and high-stakes gambling drew the rich and the ruthless. The most infamous of all was Thomas "Fatty" Walsh, a New York mobster whose luck ran out in 1929. On the 13th floor, a gunshot echoed through the night. Walsh was dead, and his killer vanished into the Florida darkness. The scandal rocked the city, and from that moment, the Biltmore's legend was entwined with the supernatural. Guests and staff whispered of elevators that moved of their own accord, music drifting from empty ballrooms, and the scent of cigar smoke lingering where no one stood. Some say Walsh himself is still seen, a heavy-set man in a vintage suit, pacing the 13th floor, forever searching for the next hand to play. The glamour faded with the coming of war. In World War II, the U.S. War Department transformed the Biltmore from a palace of pleasure to a military hospital. Ballrooms became wards, suites turned into operating rooms, and the once grand basement served as a morgue. Many soldiers were treated here, but not all left alive. In the years that followed, staff and guests would report icy drafts in the old surgical suites and the clatter of invisible gurneys. Some have glimpsed nurses in crisp, outdated uniforms, tending to patients no one else can see. After the war, the Biltmore stood silent. For nearly a decade, its grand halls gathered dust, its fountains ran dry, and its legends grew. Locals dared each other to sneak inside the abandoned hotel, and those who did often left shaken, speaking of voices in the darkness, doors that slammed with no wind, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. Restoration came in the 1980s, bringing back the marble, the gold, and the glittering lights. But the past refused to be swept away. Guests began reporting strange occurrences, lights flickering, footsteps echoing outside locked doors, and personal belongings moved while they slept. On the 13th floor, where Fatty Walsh met his end, the hauntings are most intense. Phantom parties seem to spill from closed doors, elevators arrive unbidden, and the sense of being followed never quite fades. Some guests have fled their rooms in the middle of the night, unable to shake the cold grip of fear. Other stories have surfaced over the years. A young girl seen wandering the hallways, her identity lost to time, the soft, sorrowful weeping of a woman in a forgotten suite, and staff who quietly refer to the permanent residents who never check out. The Biltmore's ghosts are as much a part of its identity as its architecture. Today, the Biltmore Hotel stands restored and resplendent, its marble and gold gleaming once more. But every era has left its mark, and every shadow holds a story. The past is never far away here. It lingers in the air, in the walls, and in the hearts of those who dare to listen. Would you spend a night on the infamous 13th floor, knowing what lingers in these halls? Number 3. The Riddle House, West Palm Beach. In the heart of West Palm Beach, surrounded by the preserved relics of old Florida, stands a house with a reputation for unrest. At first glance, the Riddle House looks like a charming piece of Florida history, a Victorian home with cheerful paint and a welcoming porch. But step inside, and you'll find a place where tragedy, unrest, and the supernatural have left their mark for more than a century. The story begins in 1905, when the house was built as the gatekeeper's cottage for West Palm Beach's Woodlawn Cemetery. From the start, it was more than just a residence. The house served as the living quarters for the cemetery's caretaker and his family, but it also functioned as a funeral parlor. Bodies awaiting burial were sometimes stored inside, and wakes were held in the parlor. For years, the Riddle House stood as a silent witness to grief and loss. In 1920, the city's first manager, Carl Riddle, purchased the home and gave it his name. Under the Riddle family, the house became a private residence, but the darkness persisted. During this era, a cemetery worker named Joseph, reportedly overwhelmed by financial hardship and despair, took his own life by hanging himself in the attic. This act is widely believed to be the root of the house's most notorious haunting. As the decades passed, the Riddle House changed hands and purposes. It became a private home for various families, and later, a dormitory for Palm Beach Atlantic College students. Each new chapter brought fresh reports of the unexplained. Male residents and visitors in particular described feeling violently unwelcome in the attic. Some were scratched, pushed, or even choked by unseen hands. Tools would vanish during renovations, only to reappear in odd places, and heavy furniture was sometimes found mysteriously overturned. By the late 1980s, facing demolition, the house was saved and relocated, piece by piece, to Yesteryear Village, a living history museum. The move didn't calm the spirits. In fact, paranormal activity seemed to intensify. Staff and visitors began to experience violent poltergeist events, furniture thrown across rooms, heavy footsteps pounding overhead, and chilling cold spots appearing out of nowhere. The attic remains the epicenter of the haunting. Paranormal investigators, including the crew from Ghost Adventures, have captured chilling evidence, disembodied voices, sudden drops in temperature, and even physical attacks. The spirit believed to be Joseph is said to harbor a deep resentment toward men, driving some to flee the attic in terror. But Joseph may not be alone. Some say the spirits of those who passed through when the house served as a funeral parlor still linger. Others have seen shadowy figures at the windows, heard sobbing in empty rooms, or caught glimpses of a woman in early 20th century dress drifting through the halls. Today, the Riddle House stands as a museum and a magnet for the curious and the brave. Every creak, every cold spot, every unexplained whisper is a reminder that the past is never truly gone here. Would you climb the attic stairs, knowing what waits above? Number 2, St. Augustine Lighthouse, St. Augustine. On the windswept coast of northern Florida, where the Atlantic meets ancient dunes and salt marsh, stands the St. Augustine Lighthouse. For centuries, this stretch of shoreline has been both a lifeline and a graveyard, its shifting sands claiming countless ships and lives long before the first bricks of the lighthouse were ever laid. The story begins in the late 16th century. Spanish watchtowers once stood here, guarding the entrance to the fledgling port of St. Augustine, the oldest city in America. Over centuries, storms and erosion claimed those early towers, but the need for a beacon remained. In 1824, the United States constructed Florida's first official lighthouse on this site, a simple coquina tower guiding sailors through treacherous waters. But as the ocean crept ever closer, the tower was doomed. By the 1870s, it was collapsing into the sea, and a new, stronger lighthouse was desperately needed. Construction on the current St. Augustine Lighthouse began in 1871. The work was grueling, the site remote, and the dangers ever present. For 3 years, laborers, craftsmen, and their families lived in temporary quarters on the grounds, battling mosquitoes, storms, and the constant threat of accident. It was during this period, in 1873, that tragedy struck the keepers' families. The superintendent's daughters, Mary, Eliza, and Carrie Petit, were playing with a supply cart used to carry materials from the bay. The cart broke loose, plunged down the hill, and tumbled into the water. 2 of the girls and a young friend drowned before help could arrive. Their laughter was silenced, but locals say the echoes of that day have never truly faded. The lighthouse was completed in 1874, rising 165 feet above the restless sea. For the next century, it served as a vital guide for mariners navigating the perilous Florida coast. Lighthouse keepers and their families lived in isolation, tending the light through hurricanes and war, births and deaths, joy and heartbreak. In 1889, tragedy struck again when headkeeper Joseph Andreu fell to his death while painting the tower. His wife, Maria, became one of the first female lighthouse keepers in America, carrying on his work in the face of loss. Life at the lighthouse was a blend of routine and hardship. Children played in the shadow of the tower, families gathered in the keeper's house, and the beam swept the horizon night after night. But the isolation, the unpredictable weather, and the ever-present danger of the sea left their mark. Over the decades, more deaths occurred. Some recorded, others whispered about in local legend. As St. Augustine grew, so did the lighthouse's legend. By the late 20th century, the tower and its outbuildings had become a museum, preserving not just maritime history, but the stories of those who never left. Staff and visitors began to report encounters they couldn't explain. In the keeper's house, doors slam with no wind, footsteps echo down empty halls, and the distinct aroma of cigar smoke, said to be a favorite of one long-dead keeper, drifts through the rooms. On stormy nights, children's laughter is heard above the wind, and shadowy figures dart among the ancient oaks. The tower itself is the epicenter of the unexplained. Many claim to see the apparition of a young girl in a blue dress, believed to be one of the Pity Sisters, peering from the spiral staircase or waving from the top landing. Others describe a woman in period clothing, her face streaked with sorrow, gazing out to sea, perhaps waiting for someone lost. Paranormal investigators have captured EVPs, unexplained cold spots, and even full-bodied apparitions on camera. Some guests report being touched, hearing their names whispered, or feeling a small, cold hand slip into theirs as they climb the 219 steps to the lantern room. One former tour guide described locking up for the night when she felt a tug on her skirt and heard a little girl's giggle, though she was alone. A visitor on a ghost tour saw a shadow dart behind the stairs, followed by the faint sound of children at play. Staff have found objects moved, lights flickering, and doors unlocking on their own, as if the lighthouse itself resists closure. Today, the St. Augustine Lighthouse is both museum and mystery, a beacon by day, a magnet for the curious and the brave by night. Ghost tours fill quickly, and those who linger after dark often leave with stories of their own. Would you climb the haunted stairs alone, knowing what and who might be waiting at the top? Number 1. The Old Jail, St. Augustine. On the northern edge of America's oldest city stands a fortress of iron and brick, a place built to contain society's darkest secrets. The Old Jail of St. Augustine is more than a relic of law and order. It is a monument to suffering, injustice, and the restless spirits that still linger within its walls. The story of the Old Jail begins in 1891, when Henry Flagler, the railroad tycoon and city visionary, commissioned a new jailhouse to be built far from the luxury hotels he was constructing downtown. The result was a deceptively ornate building, complete with turrets and decorative trim, that masked the misery inside. For over 60 years, the Old Jail housed St. Augustine's most notorious criminals, petty thieves and unfortunates swept up by the law. Its cells were cramped and unheated, the walls thick with humidity and despair. Life inside was brutal. Prisoners endured hard labor, disease, violence, and for some, execution at the gallows behind the jail. The warden and his family lived just steps away from the cell blocks, their quarters a thin barrier from the suffering on the other side of the walls. Over the decades, countless inmates died here, some by their own hand, others by violence or neglect. The stories of cruelty, injustice, and untimely death began to seep into local legend. When the jail finally closed in 1953, its reputation as one of the harshest institutions in the South was firmly established. But the end of its official use was just the beginning of its haunted legacy. As the building was transformed into a museum, staff and visitors began to experience the unexplained. Cold spots appeared in empty cells. Disembodied voices echoed down the corridors, pleas, curses, and sometimes weeping. The gallows yard, where executions took place, is notorious for shadowy figures and sudden chills. Some guests have reported the sensation of invisible hands grabbing their arms or legs, while others have felt a crushing sense of dread as they stand beneath the trap door. Guides tell of hearing footsteps pacing the upper tiers long after the last tour has ended, and the heavy iron doors are known to slam shut on their own. The cell blocks themselves are a focal point for paranormal activity. Visitors describe being overcome by nausea or sadness as they step inside, and some have seen misty apparitions drifting between the bunks. One former tour guide recounted locking up for the night, only to hear a raspy voice whisper, "You don't belong here." Another guest, exploring alone, watched as a shadowy figure materialized at the end of the hall, then vanished as quickly as it appeared. The warden's quarters, once a place of family life, are not immune. Staff have reported the sound of children laughing, the scent of pipe smoke, and the feeling of being watched from the parlor. Some believe the spirits of the warden's family remain, tied to the place that was both home and prison. Today, the Old Jail is one of St. Augustine's most popular and most haunted attractions. By day, it stands as a museum to a harsher time. By night, it draws ghost hunters and the curious from around the world. Every cell, every corridor, Every echo is a reminder that here, the past refuses to rest. Would you dare to lock yourself in a cell after dark, knowing what and who might be waiting in the shadows? Florida is a place where history drifts in with the tides, where sunlit beauty conceals stories of tragedy, mystery, and the unexplained. From the wild Everglades to the oldest streets of St. Augustine, every corner of this state carries the echoes of those who came before us. Some places remember, and in Florida, it seems the land never forgets. This has been Tyler. Thanks for joining me on this chilling exploration of the top creepy places in Florida. Which of these locations would you dare to explore? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let us know if you've ever experienced anything supernatural in the Sunshine State. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Join us for more chilling adventures. Until next time, stay curious and stay creepy. Bye for now.